I have met quite a few people who carry Taurus energy throughout my life. Some were old friends. Some passed briefly through my work. Some I only observed from a distance. And there is one quiet thing they seem to share. They are not loud people. But they are not closed off either. It is just that, at a certain point, they slow down. They slow down in a very natural way. As if something inside gently placed a hand on their shoulder and said, "That is enough." On days like that, nothing dramatic seems to happen. Life keeps moving. Messages still come in. Work still needs attention. The streetlights still turn on at the same hour each night. But Taurus feels different. Their steps fall just a little slower. Their eyes linger longer on a familiar window, a quiet street corner, or even a strip of light on the wall late at night. Not sad, not happy, just a sense that something inside has settled. I once sat next to a Taurus in a crowded cafe. People around us were talking loudly. Cups and saucers kept clinking against each other. And yet, that person sat quietly, looking out through the glass, their hand resting on a cup of coffee that had gone cold without them noticing. They were not tired. They were not withdrawn. It felt more like they were sitting in a quiet room of their own, even while the world outside stayed loud. That kind of stillness does not come from sadness. It comes like the moment when you are walking down a familiar road, and suddenly realize you have been moving too fast for too long. You did not trip, you did not lose your way. You simply feel the urge to stop, to stand still for a few minutes, and feel the ground beneath your feet. For Taurus, these silent moments feel like a late-night lamp in a small room. Not too bright, not meant to impress, but just enough light to reveal the thoughts resting quietly inside. Thoughts they did not have time to hear during the day, when everything was moving too fast. There are moments when Taurus does not respond right away. Not because they do not care, but because they are listening inward, trying to sense where their heart actually is. There are moments when they choose to be alone, not out of distance, but out of need. A need for space where the breath can slow down, like a small flame that needs less wind so it does not burn too fast. I have noticed that the louder the outside world becomes, the clearer Taurus's quiet moments appear, as if this is their natural way of finding balance, not fighting the world, not turning away from it, just stepping back slightly, enough to avoid being swept along. And strangely, it is in these silent moments that Taurus feels most real. No role to play, no responsibility to carry, no need to be anyone's anchor. Just a person sitting there, listening to themselves, while the world continues to move. Perhaps for Taurus, silence is not a sign that something is about to happen. It is simply a pause, a necessary one, like a piece of music slowing down, so the listener can feel each note, before the melody continues on in its own quiet way. And after moments like those, there is something I often notice about Taurus. They do not disappear from the world. They still go to work. They still keep their promises. They still finish what needs to be done. But inside, there is a part of them that has grown tired, a part very few people notice. The part that always has to stay strong. The part that always has to be the most stable person in the room. The one others lean on when everything starts to shake. There are evenings when porch light spills softly into a quiet room, and Taurus sits there feeling their back heavier than usual. Not because the day was especially demanding, but because it has been a long time since they asked themselves a simple question. Am I actually okay? Strength, when carried for too long, can begin to feel like a thick coat. It keeps you warm, yes. But if you never take it off, it can make it hard to breathe. I have seen Taurus offer a very small smile when someone says, "You are always so strong." That smile is not quite sad. It feels like a small flame left after a long day. Just enough to give warmth, not enough to rise into something larger. Inside that smile is a gentle kind of exhaustion. No resentment. No demand to be understood. Just quiet acceptance. Perhaps Taurus does not avoid the world because they understand the world needs them present. And yet, There are moments when they need a space where they do not have to hold themselves upright. A place with no image to maintain. No complete answers required. No need to straighten their back, just to prove they are still fine. These quiet stretches arrive like a slow afternoon, when a familiar road suddenly has fewer cars than usual. Taurus still walks that road, but their steps grow lighter, their gaze reaches farther. Not to search for a different path, but to make sure the one they are on still feels worth continuing. Some emotions are pressed deep down, not because Taurus is afraid to face them, but because they have learned to put them last. Tasks first. Responsibilities completed. Fatigue acknowledged only after everything else. But emotions left unattended for too long will eventually find their own way to speak. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just through a simple request. To breathe more slowly, in silence. And in those moments, Taurus begins to allow themselves to be imperfect. They do not need to be anyone's anchor for a few hours. They do not need to answer every question right away. They can simply sit still, like a small flame shielded from the wind, so it does not burn too fast, so it stays warm enough for the long road ahead. That quiet does not make Taurus weaker. If anything changes, it is the way they keep moving forward. Slower, steadier, and just a little closer to themselves, even as the world outside continues to spin very fast. And within that flow, something slowly becomes clear to Taurus. Silence does not mean emptiness. It is like dimming the lights in a room, not to let darkness take over, but to allow what remains to feel softer. In that space, no one is watching. No eyes are waiting for an explanation. No sense of having to keep pace for anyone else. There is only enough room to let the shoulders drop, to let the breath return to a familiar rhythm. Some afternoons, Taurus sits by the window and looks out at the road in front of the house. Cars still pass. People still hurry along. Yet inside, everything feels unusually calm. Not because they have stepped away from the world, but because for the first time that day, there is no role to play. No need to prove strength. No need to prove that everything is fine. Those things quietly lose their importance. Silence, in moments like this, is not retreat. It feels more like setting down a backpack that has been worn for too long. Not to abandon it, but to give the back a moment of rest. Taurus leaves messages unanswered for a few more minutes, lets unfinished questions drift aside, and allows themselves to simply sit there. Watching late-night light fall across the wall. Listening to the soft sound of wind outside the balcony. In this stillness, there is no judgment. No one needs to know what was accomplished today, how much was achieved, how steady they managed to remain. Taurus is no longer standing in front of any expectation, not even their own. There is only a simple, honest feeling. I am here, and that is enough for this moment. Strangely, when there is no effort to become anyone else, familiar shapes inside Taurus begin to appear more clearly. Simple desires, weariness that never had a name, things once set aside because life moved too fast. They surface gently, without demand, without urgency, like a quiet whisper, asking only to be heard. Perhaps that is when Taurus realizes that stillness is not loneliness. Loneliness carries a sense of absence. This kind of quiet feels full of presence, full of unspoken thoughts, full of a small sense of safety, like a flame protected in a quiet room. And when there is no longer anything to prove to anyone, Taurus begins to feel lighter. Not because everything has been resolved, but because there is no longer a need to explain their place in the journey to the world. It is enough to remain there in silence, letting thoughts move at their own pace. Slow, honest, and unhurried. When the pace of life settles like that, feelings that were always there, but once passed by too quickly, begin to return with more clarity. Not in a loud or overwhelming way, but like early morning, when the light is still thin and the world has not fully awakened. Taurus starts to realize how accustomed they have become to moving fast, so fast that many small things were quietly left behind. Sometimes it is only a very simple desire. The wish to sit a little longer in a quiet room, without turning on another light, letting the daylight from the window slowly fill the space. Sometimes, it is a very gentle sadness, without a clear name, resting there like an empty chair in the corner of the room. It does not cause pain right away, but it does not disappear either when it continues to be ignored. When everything slows down, Taurus finally has the space to look directly at these feelings, not rushing to fix them, not trying to organize them neatly into a box, just noticing them and allowing them to exist exactly as they are. Strangely, some feelings only appear when no one is urging, when there is no reminder that something must be finished first. I once saw a Taurus pull over at the side of the road near the end of the day. Not because they were tired, but because the sunset looked different that evening. They stood there for a few minutes, watching the light change on the pavement, as if noticing for the first time that even a familiar road holds moments of its own. No major decision was made. Just a brief sense of peace, small and quiet, yet enough to remind them that they were still here, alive in that moment. Some dreams were set aside, not because they lacked meaning, but because Taurus often chose practicality first, responsibility first, safety first. Yet when things slow down, those dreams do not accuse, and they do not demand attention. They appear quietly, like a small flame still burning beneath the ashes, waiting to be seen. This kind of stillness feels like very early morning, when the city is half asleep. There is little sound, yet everything feels more visible. Taurus begins to sense what weighs on the heart, and what still keeps it warm. Not to change anything right away, but to understand that these feelings have always been there, waiting to be listened to. And in this slowing down, Taurus does not search for answers. On some days, simply realizing what has been forgotten feels like enough. There is no need to promise that things will be different. No need to draw up a new plan. It is enough to know that inside, there are still layers of feeling that are honest and real, never truly gone. Perhaps these gentle moments help Taurus remember what living first felt like. Not always moving forward. Sometimes standing still, so the light has time to reach corners long untouched. And in that soft light, Taurus does not find any grand answers, but does find a quiet connection to themselves. Just enough to keep walking, in their own rhythm. When everything begins to move again, there is something easily misunderstood about Taurus and their quiet moments. From the outside, it can look like retreat, like a door closing on the world. But Taurus is not truly turning away. They are simply standing a little to the side, the way you step back from a painting on the wall to finally see the whole picture. Not because they do not want to be part of it, but because they want to understand where they stand within it. When Taurus grows quiet, their life does not stop. The familiar roads still need to be walked. Relationships remain present. Responsibilities continue. Inside, though, something small and subtle shifts, like turning a chair slightly toward the light so the eyes no longer have to strain. They do not disappear. They are simply rearranging their position. I once watched a Taurus after a long period of slowing down. When they returned to their usual routine, nothing looked dramatically different on the surface. Same person, same voice, same calm presence. Yet there was a feeling difficult to name, as if they had carried a piece of inner quiet out into everyday life. Not much, just enough to keep from being pulled along too fast. Taurus returning to themselves does not feel like separation. It is not a door being shut. It feels more like a window left slightly open. The wind still comes through. Sounds from outside still enter. But inside, the air has changed. Easier to breathe. More honest. Less heavy. There are moments when Taurus realizes they have lived for a long time by other people's rhythm. By what should be done. What needs to be done. What must be done. None of it wrong. But not entirely their own. Quiet moments allow them to see this without blame. Just a gentle recognition that some things have been carried on behalf of others, and some things have been quietly forgotten. Returning to themselves does not mean leaving the world behind. It means stepping back into it with a more honest version of who they are. A version that does not need to prove strength at all times. That does not need to keep pace for everyone else. Only steady enough to know what helps them continue and what makes them slow down. On certain evenings, when streetlights stretch across the pavement, Taurus walks among the crowd and still feels a small pocket of calm inside. Not because everything is settled, but because they have allowed themselves to be more truthful with their own feelings. And that quiet honesty, though barely noticeable, makes the steps that follow feel lighter. The world keeps turning. Life keeps moving fast. But Taurus, after stepping back once, no longer stands in the same place. They move forward, not to escape, but to meet the world in a way that fits them better. Like a small flame, not flaring brightly, but warm enough to light dark stretches of the road, and steady enough to keep burning in the wind. And perhaps it is this quiet return that allows Taurus to remain present in life, not through constant effort, but through a simple, honest feeling. I am living, not merely enduring. Once they recognize this, Taurus begins to see their own endurance differently. Endurance has long been praised, relied upon, seen as a quality they must always carry. But endurance, when stretched without rest, is like a long road with no place to stop. No matter how familiar it is, the legs eventually grow tired. There are days when Taurus realizes they have gone too far on habit alone, still walking steadily, still not complaining. Yet inside, something feels more hollow than before. Not because there is no purpose, but because they have grown used to moving forward without asking whether there is still enough warmth inside to keep going. In moments like that, quiet is no longer a choice. It becomes necessary, like lowering the flame after a full day of constant cooking. Taurus is like a small fire that burns for a long time, not bright, not overwhelming, just always there, steady, patient, and because of that, they rarely allow themselves true rest. Rest does not mean stopping completely. It means shielding the flame for a moment, so it is not carried away by invisible winds called responsibility, expectation, and familiarity. I have seen Taurus sit still on an ordinary evening, not clearly exhausted, not sad, just not wanting to do one more thing. The light in the room softens, the noise from the street fades, and they let the silence fill the space, not to think about anything big, but simply to notice where the body and the mind are. A kind of rest that is very quiet, very real. It is in moments like these that Taurus begins to understand that rest does not make them weaker. On the contrary, it preserves enough strength to continue with endurance in a healthier way. Like a long road that needs shaded stretches. Like a flame that must be protected to burn evenly. No one really sees these moments, and Taurus does not need anyone to see them. This slowing down carries no guilt. There is no feeling of neglect, no sense of falling behind. Only a gentle acceptance. I do not have to be strong all the time. Sometimes, being warm is enough. Warm enough not to go out. Warm enough to want to step outside again tomorrow. And when they have rested enough, Taurus returns to their path. Not rushing. Not forcing proof of strength. They carry a slower breath, a deeper gaze, and a steadiness that has been renewed. Not endurance that forgets itself, but endurance supported from within. Perhaps this is what feels most unique about Taurus. They do not need great changes to go far. Only pauses that are quiet enough, honest enough, so the inner flame does not burn itself away. And in that quiet rest, Taurus does not lose their strength. They are simply preserving it for the long roads still ahead. When quiet stays long enough, something very subtle begins to happen inside Taurus. Not big thoughts, not clear decisions. Just a smaller voice, one that used to be easily drowned out, suddenly becoming easier to hear. That voice does not push. It does not command. It only asks very simple questions. What do I need right now? What makes my heart feel lighter, even just a little? With the noise of other people's expectations gone, Taurus begins to notice how used they have become to listening to the outside world. Advice, expectations, even silences filled with unspoken meaning. When all of that steps back, the inner room feels more empty, and because of that, more resonant. Each small thought finally has a place to pause, instead of being rushed along. There are evenings when Taurus sits alone in a room lit by a single warm lamp. Nothing specific to do. No background music needed, just the steady sound of a clock moving forward. In that steady rhythm, very honest thoughts begin to surface. Not all of them are comfortable. Some things once avoided now stand quietly in front of them. No blame, no accusation, just waiting to be seen. Strangely, when things are quiet enough, Taurus does not find clear answers. Instead, there are sensations. A sense of being in the right place. A sense of familiarity. Like an object that was set in the wrong spot for too long and is finally returned to where it belongs. No applause. No dramatic moment. Just a very gentle sense of fit, enough to recognize it. I once heard a Taurus say they did not need to know exactly where they were going. They only needed to know that the direction they were moving in did not make them shrink. It was a soft statement, and a very honest one. Because when the inner voice is heard, Taurus no longer needs detailed maps. They only need to feel whether each step still moves in rhythm with themselves. In those quiet moments, old memories sometimes return. Choices once made for safety. Silence is chosen to preserve harmony. Not to regret them, but to understand that all of it belongs to the journey. The inner voice does not judge the past. It simply reminds them that the present is still open, moving slowly and truthfully. There are days when Taurus steps outside with a very different feeling. Nothing outside has changed, but inside, there is a new point of support. Not a grand belief, but a sense of familiarity with themselves, like someone who has been in darkness for a long time, and when they step into the light, it does not feel blinding, because they have learned how to open their eyes gradually. When Taurus is quiet enough, they do not become distant. Instead, they become more present. No need to say much. No need for long explanations, just being there, with a very gentle certainty. I am standing in the right place, at the right moment, moving in my own rhythm. And perhaps that is the quiet gift of stillness. It carries no promises. It draws no clear picture of the future. It simply helps Taurus hear a familiar voice within. One that has always been there, waiting for a moment quiet enough to be heard again. And as that quiet space slowly begins to close, Taurus does not keep it to themselves like a secret that needs to be hidden away. They carry that stillness back outside, very lightly, like the warmth that lingers in a room after the light has been turned off. Life continues again. Familiar conversations. The same roads. The tasks that still need to be finished. There is no obvious sign for others that anything has changed. But inside, there is a feeling that is difficult to name. Not a surge of confidence. Not a complete answer. Just the sense of having returned to the right place, after a small turn that very few people ever noticed. Like stepping out of darkness, where the light does not feel harsh, only clear enough to see each step more carefully. The quiet eventually ends, but the return remains. It does not take up much space. It does not ask to be spoken about. It shows itself quietly in the way Taurus pauses before speaking, in the way they choose silence when words are not needed, and in the way they walk forward without holding themselves as tightly as before. Perhaps Taurus does not remember those quiet moments every single day. But when the pace of life becomes too fast, the memory of them returns naturally, like an invisible support, reminding them that they once allowed themselves to slow down, and nothing bad came from it. Perhaps everyone has a quiet place like this, in their own way. A place with no need to prove anything. No need to rush. Just a few moments to be fully themselves. Taurus simply happens to notice that stepping into that stillness does not cost them anything. It allows them to keep something very real. And if one day, in the middle of busy routines, you find yourself slowing down, not from exhaustion, but from a desire to listen, perhaps that too is a gentle reminder that somewhere inside, a familiar voice is waiting to be heard again, in the softest possible way. The story rests here, but the feeling does not. It stays quietly, like a late-night light still glowing in a calm room. not to light the road far ahead, but to remind you that you are still home, in your own way.